Good morning to you. A very, very warm welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Friday morning. I hope you're well and cheerful today. May I remind you, we have some services you can join us online for over the weekend. That's Saturday evening, tomorrow evening at 5:30. We have a meditation. It's a thought-provoking meditation on how the story of Jesus in the wilderness might have looked from the devil's perspective. One for you to listen to tomorrow night, 5:30. Sunday morning, we have a live stream service from St Bart's at 10 o'clock. We have a service from St Anne's at 11:45, and a night prayer with contemporary language, modern language, at 5:30 on Sunday evening. But wherever you are, do join us. We'd love to see you for our worship over the weekend. Now, my friends, we are in John's Gospel, and I'm just going to set the scene for you a little bit. What we've got so far, out comes this here map again, if hopefully you can see it. This, as you can see, is the Mediterranean Sea down here. Jesus had turned water into wine at Cana, which is near Cana of Galilee. Cana up his way turned water into wine. He went down to Jerusalem for the festival. Jerusalem is there. He was then baptizing in the Judean countryside. He then goes north, so he goes to Shechem, or Sychar, as it's known, which is there. That's where he met yesterday. We talked about Jesus meeting the Samaritan woman at the well in Samaria, as you can see. And then he now moves up north, back up north again up here. Capernaum is here, and Cana is here by Galilee. So, without further ado, I shall read you this morning's reading. It's a short reading this morning. It's from John's Gospel, chapter 4. I'm beginning to read at verse 43. When the 2 days were over, Jesus went from that place to Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honour in the prophet's own country. When he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, since they had seen all he'd done at Jerusalem at the festival, for they too had gone to the festival. Then he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had changed the water into wine. Now there was a royal official whose son lay ill in Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and begged him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The official said to him, "Sir, come down before my little boy dies." Jesus said to him, "Go, your son will live." The man believed that the word that Jesus spoke to him and started on his way. As he was going down, his slaves met him and told him that his child was alive. So he asked them the hour when he began to recover, and they said to him, "Yesterday at 1 p.m, the fever left him." The father realized this was the hour when Jesus said to him, "Your son will live." So he himself believed, along with his whole household. Now this was the second sign that Jesus did after coming from Judea to Galilee. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, fascinating reading this one. Jesus goes up to Cana of Galilee, a place where he turned water into wine. Well, he might. I'm sure he had a reputation will precede him there. And he goes there. But what I think is interesting, though, is the places where Jesus was successful. Jesus had just had 2 very successful days in Sychar. They had received him well. The woman at the well had told them all about Jesus. They'd come, they'd seen, they'd responded. Jesus had done well. They'd welcomed him there. They welcomed him also in Galilee. So he'd been welcomed, as I say, amongst the Samaritans. He'd been welcomed amongst the Galileans. But he hadn't been welcomed very much by the people in Jerusalem down south. That's how it happened. He wasn't welcomed, you might say, in the places where he might have expected him to be welcomed, amongst religious people, amongst people of his own kind. But he was well received amongst the hated Samaritans and by the Galileans as well. Because Jesus said, a prophet is not without honour except in his own country. So he wasn't welcomed in the places where you'd expect him to be welcomed normally. But he was welcomed by the people you wouldn't necessarily expect him to. And I think in a sense the message for us for that really is that often never fail to be surprised by the people God reaches. God reaches the most unexpected people. In my experience, it's often the people you least expect to become Christians that do, and those that most expect them to don't respond. And it's also worth saying, let's be honest, sometimes some of the most difficult people to persuade about our faith are the people we're closest to, aren't they? Our family are often the most difficult to convince about our faith sometimes. So, first thing to note from this reading is that Jesus was really well welcomed by the people you didn't expect him to, and wasn't welcomed, you might say, by the religious people in the south in Jerusalem, who the people you thought might. That's the first thing. But then Jesus has this encounter with this royal official. He was probably an official of Herod Antipas. Now, technically speaking, Herod wasn't the king, but he liked to think he was, so he called himself a royal. And this man was a sort of royal official. And he comes to Jesus, and he's basically out of his wits with worry. And well, he might be, because his son is gravely ill and at the point of death. And he comes to Jesus and begging him to make his son live. And I guess you must have heard that Jesus had turned water into wine, and Jesus could do amazing things. And so he comes to Jesus, begging Jesus to help him, because his son is at the point of death. And what Jesus does here is, Jesus is quite interesting, and he does this quite a lot. He doesn't just say, bang, it's done. What he does is he engages with the person and tries to tease it out. And he kind of encourages them to lead them on in their faith, so that there's more than just what they expected. And so Jesus doesn't just say, your son is better. He teases them out of it by basically saying, you've only come to me because you want to see signs and wonders. And the man says, do, and the man kind of responds to this by saying, no, come and see my son and he will live. And I think what Jesus is trying to get us to do here is, Jesus wasn't just a miracle worker. Jesus wasn't just a magician who made people better and does things that we wanted to do all the time. You can't just come to Jesus for that. You have to learn to trust Jesus and to do what Jesus says too. And the man couldn't just come to Jesus to have his son healed. He had to learn to trust Jesus and to go home and trust that Jesus had done it, which the man did. And so I think what we have to learn to do with Jesus really is not just come to Jesus like some sugar daddy or version of Father Christmas. We have to learn not just to want things from Jesus, but we have to learn in our lives to trust Jesus and to do what Jesus said, and to obey him and trust him and walk with him. And because the man trusted in Jesus, because he believed the word that Jesus said, he went home. And that's when he found the incredible thing, that his son had been made better. And what's more, to make the point, he was made better at exactly the same time when Jesus said to him, your son will live. So the message for us is, we shouldn't just turn to Jesus when we need something, or that's fine, but we also need in our lives to learn to trust Jesus, to listen to what he says and do what he says and obey him. And as the old hymn used to say, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. So we have to turn to Jesus, not just in our hour of need, but we have to learn to walk with him and trust him in our lives too. But it says at the end also, this was the second sign that Jesus did. And the first sign being turning water into wine, but there's a second sign here. And a sign, as I said to you before, is something that points to something else. And what does Jesus do in this reading? He makes a young man at the point of death live. And I think that tells us what Jesus does for us. He gives us life. As John chapter 1 says, in him was life, and the life was the light of people. He came to give us life. And in John chapter 10, verse 10, he said, I come to give you life, and life in all its fullness. And in this reading, he gives this young man life. He was at the point of death. He's now going to live. And for us, actually, Jesus gives us life. In this life, he gives us value. He gives us love. He gives us meaning. He makes life worth living. He's the difference between merely existing in life and truly living life. And of course, he comes to give us life, which goes on into eternity as well. So, my friends, this fascinating encounter between Jesus and this royal official and his son, I think it tells us three things we should take away this morning. Firstly, that God reaches the most surprising people, and it's often the most amazing people who do respond to Jesus, and it's often the most amazing people who don't, and that we never can tell. But often in Jesus' case here, it's those who weren't like him who responded best. Secondly, to say that we have to learn in our lives not just to turn to Jesus when times are tough, that we have to learn also, this reading got the man to learn to trust Jesus and to do what Jesus said. And also to remind you of the wonderful news that Jesus came to give us life, an absolutely abundant life in this life and life beyond the grave, life for eternity too. And may you know that true life this weekend. God bless you.